country. But it is not limited to being targeted by the government. Also, what about the private sector? What about corporates and all the businesses and what they can do in order to facilitate better taking care of issues that arise from corruption, in eliminating corruption as well? So it is estimated that Kenya loses upwards of R1 trillion to corruption every year. Now, the fight has been championed severally, and it continues to be championed as well. So in response, the private sector wants to get involved, and the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, that is KEPSA, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Center for International Private Enterprise, in partnership with Milestones Resource Solutions, will be hosting a 2-day conference in Nairobi starting tomorrow. So they're going to be talking about improving ethics to increase profitability. And joining me now on set, I'd like to welcome Fatma El-Mawi, the CEO of Milestone Resource Solutions, to talk a little bit further to us. And thank you so much for joining us, Fatma, please. And glad to have you with us. Of course, this conference is going to be very important. There's a lot that's going to be discussed here. And what are you exactly aiming to do? Why don't you start by telling us that?
Okay, number one, we would like the private sector to acknowledge the fact that we also are party to this. We cannot afford to be holier than thou attitude, because corruption has a demand side, but it also has a supply side. And as much as the public sector is the demand side, the private sector is actually the supply side. So we are part and parcel of it.
All right. So this interrelation between the public and the private sector, where does corruption, where do you see the gaps, the holes that need to be filled?
The gap, to be honest with you, is this myth that I have to be corrupt in order for me to run a business. And what the conference is all about is to tell the private sector, you don't have to be corrupt for you to run your business. Research has shown that ethical businesses actually are longer lasting and they make more money in the long term, rather than trying to look for a quick buck that is now, today, and then you're not there tomorrow. Yeah.
Very interesting. So what are some of the basics that any organization should have in place when it comes to fighting this vice?
Okay. Number one, all organizations should have what we call a code of conduct, a code of ethics, and the biggest of them all is the tone at the top, because it is the top. That is the directors, the CEOs, the management team that decides how that organization is going to be run. Now, when it comes to the staff, or rather the people who fall under, they will simply follow. You know the adage, you cannot preach water and you drink wine?
Absolutely.
And it really works.
Okay.
Yes.
So it has to go all the way through the chain.
It has to go all the way. It's about code of conduct, code of ethics. What are your policies, if any? What are the procedures of the organization? What are the gaps? Every organization needs to do what we call a matrix assessment. Where do you have the gaps? It is also researched and said that 10% of a population or of the workforce will not engage in corruption no matter what happens.
10%.
10%. The other 10% will always look for a gap.
Okay.
They will engage. Now, this leaves us with the 80% in the middle. Now, that 80%, if you have processes, if you have procedures, if you train your people on your vision, on what the culture of the organization is, that 80% in the middle will go into the incorruptible, rather than, if an organization doesn't have that, naturally they will also fall into the corruptible phase. Now, you need to take control as a company. Do you want your 80% to be part of the corruptible, or do you want that 80% to move in the incorruptible? One more thing which we're going to discuss as businesses, and I think this is really crucial, because we as Kenyans feel, I must give kitu kidogo for me to move on.
Yes.
But the idea here is we lose over 20% of your profits to corruption. How do we do that? Either do fraudulent deals, or the cost of running an organization is increased by the staff. Now, if the rate of profits is actually between 20 to 30%, and you already lose the 20%, what are you left with?
So it's actually in your own favor, not just ethically, but business-wise as well, profit-wise.
It actually, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and this is what we want to tell companies. Tomorrow and Thursday, you make more money by being ethical.
All right.
Yeah.
So what kind of organizations are you going to have on board for the conference to be taking us through, talking to us?
To be honest with you, we wanted the private sector. We wanted to talk to each other. You know, this may not be a very good example, but if somebody is an alcoholic, you have to accept I'm an alcoholic before you can get a solution. Now, in this particular conference, we want to accept, guys, we are part of the problem. So now that we're part of the problems, what do we do to get it out? We've invited global speakers who will be coming and talking to us. We've also invited Lagos Chamber of Commerce. We have some delegates from Mauritius, and they will tell us what they did in their journey in order to reduce corruption in their own countries, and what worked and what did not work. What can we as Kenyans pick, and what as we as Kenyans maybe we need to tweak it a little.
Okay.
So it's purely private sector. Government has been there through MCAC, the religious people, they did the multi-sectoral. This time it's the private sector talking to each other.
Very interesting. And also if we look at Kenya as a whole, in the Transparency International Corruption Index this year, Kenya obtained a score of 27 out of 100, a decline from 28 points in 2017. So it put us at about 144 out of 180 countries. Some people would say 1 point here, there doesn't make a difference, but it does. It does. So how can the private sector coming in and ensuring that they limit corruption also help bolster our standing globally in terms of how we're dealing with corruption?
Okay. What the private sector, me included, we need to accept is these small things actually do matter. And in the long run, if, for example, I've started a company today, I would like my company to outgrow me. However, if I don't think long term, this company either collapses, and we have seen the number of organizations that collapse, or it is not able to work. Now, the private sector, most of the people that are there want their organizations to outlast them. So it is in their interest, not even the government, in their interest, number one, to make sure they work ethically. Number two, no organization can sustain this. As I said, we lose 22% already. Now, if we are losing that 22%, you will need to make it up somewhere, isn't it?
Okay.
And that is where you engage in corruption. So why do you want to do that? Whereas if you can work ethically, you still get that 20%, and you don't lose it, and you sleep better, you have a better brand, and you also keep, most important, you keep good staff.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Fatma, for joining us and for highlighting all that the conference needs to do and beyond.
That is so true. And when a consultant tells you you'll make more money, you've got to listen.